Okay, let's make a start. Well, hello, a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Carly Hardy. I'll be your moderator for this webinar. Clean Power starts in prep, power planning and teamwork for a lower emission shoot. First and foremost, some thank yous. BAFTA Albert would like to thank Sunbelt Rentals, their event partners, as well as Albert Sustainable Production Task Force for their support and for making this webinar free and available. We couldn't do this without them. It's time for me to give you a quick sense of who's on screen with us today. You are in for a treat. We have rustled up la creme de la creme in terms of industry power chat. So how about a round of introductions? Karl, we'll begin with you if that's okay. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and what your connection is to clean power?
Didn't realize we were introducing ourselves. Hello, everybody. I am Karl Liegis. I'm head of production at 6040 Films. We produce high-end TV drama. My relationship to clean power is that we build sustainability into the foundations of our productions, and clean power is one of those fundamental approaches.
Amazing, thank you. Suzanne, are you happy to go next?
Yeah, so I'm founder of Decarbon Alliance. I started my journey back in 2008, testing the industry's first ever carbon calculator when I was at EastEnders, hence its name. Feel very privileged to have been in this since the beginning. But more recently was working as BBC Studios production sustainability manager, where I led clean temporary power over 40 different pan-genre productions. So have lots of insights of successes and challenges.
Amazing, thanks, Suzanne. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Alex. I'm a sustainability consultant at Picture Zero. Most of my work's been on the high-end TV drama and feature film stuff, and obviously energy use and power is a major impact area. So it's been a cornerstone of a lot of the work that we've done over the years on production, and certainly with regards to kind of recent changes to maybe how we approach that work across the industry. I think how central power planning is becoming to everything that we're doing. It's definitely on the tip of everyone's tongues at the moment. So it's great to be here, and I feel very privileged to be part of the panel.
Thanks, Alex. And then Steve, finally yourself, please.
Thanks, Carly. Hi, I'm Steve Knight. I'm a clean power consultant with Creative Zero, and I work directly with productions, broadcasters, creative agencies, etc. Prior to that, I worked in camera and lighting rental for most of my career, the most recent one being the MD of Pixie Pixel. And during my time at Pixie Pixel, we supplied camera lighting and power setups to over 150 TV dramas and films. Very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Amazing, thanks, Steve. So a bit of housekeeping. There is a Q&A function available. So if you think of a question while we're all chatting, then please put it into the Q&A box, and then we'll try and answer as many of those questions towards the end of the session. Before we dive in, I want to share something important. Clean power planning is quite new. Some might say it's only just arriving in our industry. On that basis, we may not have all the answers today, and as we go through the webinar, you might hear both challenges and solutions. Okay, let's make a start. So clean power starts in prep. What do we mean when we say clean power? So we thought to bring this to life for you, we talk you through the power management hierarchy. So we're going to get a little bit technical early on. I hope that's okay. And Alex, you've kindly agreed to do this. You have been tipped off. Yes, could we kindly see slide A? We've got a supporting slide for this, hopefully. Amazing. Alex, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carly. Yeah, so look, a lot of what we're trying to do on production are not just sustainability professionals, but everyone's job is relatively complicated. Certainly from a sustainability point of view, that's true as well. So I find the role of frameworks, things like hierarchies, really useful to try and, I guess, structure in our minds the priorities for action on production. So in this case, talking about a power hierarchy. The one on the screen here, I think, is the one that belongs to Steve and the Creative Zero team, but I'm sure people have seen various iterations of power management hierarchies before. I think the key thing that's common to all of them is that they're generally guided by the emissions intensity of the energy that's being produced from whatever solution you end up using on a production. And so in that regard, we're looking at a situation where the most sustainable, the least the lowest emissions intensity power solution is near the top, and obviously at the bottom we've got what might have been business as usual in the past, but is certainly now being looked at as a way that we're trying to pass creating power on production. And so it's probably worth just defining quickly what we mean when we're talking about emissions intensity, if that's underpinning a lot of this, the structure that we're bringing to power management on production. And I suppose just keep this as detailed as it needs to be without going into too much detail. So Carly, pull me back if I'm going too detailed. But if you're to take the unit of output that we demand from a power solution, and let's take that to be kilowatt hours, as the most commonly, we're all aware of that potentially from our home lives, but also from what we do on production. Kilowatt hours, standardized unit of measurement of energy that comes out of a power solution. Now, there are various costs associated with producing that energy. And so we can think of those as financial costs. We're all aware of those, and certainly people in Karl's position, for example, who are also on the call, will be familiar with the cost side of power. What's really interesting is there's another non-financial cost that comes to creating energy, and that is the emissions that are associated with that. And so whilst in the same way there are expensive ways financially to create energy that we're going to use on production, there are also expensive ways from an environmental point of view. And that's measured obviously by the emissions associated with each kilowatt hour that can come out of a power solution. And so I feel like, you know, the structure of this hierarchy is relatively self-explanatory in that regard. So we're moving from a relatively low emissions way of creating energy near the top down to a higher emissions way of doing that. The key caveat being that actually before we get into looking at power solutions at all, what Steve's got on the top of that hierarchy there in the form of prevention, and I'd say also to bundle in the efficiency side of things, these are interventions that are, you know, in theory costing us nothing to do and are actually just eliminating kilowatt hours from the picture in terms of what we're having to supply into to do the job of whatever that particular job is on a production. And so starting with efficiency gains and starting with questioning whether that energy is needed in the first place is that is the fundamental place that we should all be going to before we start specifying solutions. And that's certainly how energy management is approached in industries outside of our own. There are particular creative constraints to a lot of the energy and power that we're creating on production that make it slightly more difficult to perhaps make interventions at this level, but it's certainly worth us doing that. And great examples across the industry now of particularly on efficiency, think of LED lighting and how commonplace that is now for lighting our sets. That's a great example of an efficiency gain. It's reducing our energy consumption by something around 70%, and therefore the number of kilowatt hours that we're having to produce to achieve the same output from a lighting point of view. Great example. When we move below that, we're starting to look at how we're going to supply the power that we do need. So we've already sense checked whether we need it or not, and now we're into what's the most appropriate solution. And I think you could argue the toss from an emissions intensity point of view between grid power in the UK and elsewhere in the world and clean tech solutions. You can argue the toss around that, and I would welcome that. But certainly, I think at this stage, grid power we should be seeing as the fundamental first option for providing power wherever it's available. And the reasons for that, like I say, it's low, relatively speaking, and it varies significantly country to country. In the UK, you're looking at a pretty high percentage of renewables going into our grid at the moment, and one of the reasons for continuing to prioritise grid power is that is improving, and it's improving not just in the UK, it's improving globally. So the relative emissions intensity of our grid power is coming down. So a great place to
Alex,
start.
I'm going to have to give you 1 more minute.
Yep,
so you might
no
have to do the next 3 sections a little bit more high level.
No problem. Okay, yeah. So beyond the grid power side of things, I think we can group this into, I mean, you can see how it's been grouped there. I would suggest looking at clean technologies, which are liquid fuel free or traditional fuel sources free. So I'd be thinking of battery power to transport grid energy to places that we want it, where there's no grid power available. I'd also be thinking of green hydrogen. I'd be thinking of on-site renewables generation. After that, you've got a bit of a gap filler in the sense that it's straddling both sides of a traditional power source and some of that clean tech, hybrid generators. I'm sure many on the call are up to speed with what they do. And then below that, quite rightly, got the note about HVO as a replacement for fossil fuels in ideally right-sized generators.
Amazing. So in its simplest form, we can use this as a decision-making tool if we're trying to make a decision about, a clean power solution, and ultimately where we want to go, where we want to be one day, is to be able to trace all our electricity back to the grid or to micro on-site renewables. But we can't get there cost effectively without energy efficiency. I guess in a bundle, that's what this is kind of saying. Thanks, Alex. I hope everyone's still with us in terms of technicalities or technical thinking. I just want to jump now to stakeholders and teamwork. It's probably really tempting when you're working in prep to jump straight into solutions. Oh my gosh, what are my power solutions going to be? But Karl, is there a really important sort of hearts and minds piece that we shouldn't ignore that's really going to pay dividends in prep?
Yes. Does that speed up the panel if I just say yes?
No, you have to tell us all
Alex,
about it, I'm afraid.
No, so as I said in my introduction, we build it into the foundations of like very, very early planning. Like we're talking about things now and developing things now for projects that aren't there yet. So we start this work with like integration into the development by enrolling our development team and writers. They attend the Albert Masterclasses, the sessions. We carry out script reads and then provide reports on them for like active and incidental opportunities in drafts that we then build from. And then we also know from a crew level, from our own experiences as freelancers, that the messaging from the company like can inform so much. So we set out our stall very early on, and we present our intentions and commitments when we're interviewing people for the job on the production, whether senior creatives, HODs, members of departments. And by doing it at the interview stage, there's no surprises then, and there's also opportunity for them that they can see, that they may never have been in a situation where it's brought to their attention so early, so they can really start thinking about the project itself and how sustainability and clean power can exist within all of that. And then it also means that, if we do end up working together, that there's an accountability for our commitments that we've made, and then the opportunities that are there for them. So that's the sort of interview stage. And then we also, when we're in that interview stage, we're informing them about the Sustainability Council that we have on our productions, which is where we have one member of each department, a senior member of each department, who's required to form part of a Sustainability Council. And then a member of 6040 production team is always in that Sustainability Council meeting as well. We make sure that the relevant departments know and will be expected to attend the power plan meetings that we have, which are during at least once during prep of each block. So that's the suppliers as well. So it's not just the departments that are in that. And then sort of at the same time as all of that's happening, we hire a sustainability consultant who then works with us from pre-prep to agree on a plan, which includes identifying the opportunities, commitments, reviewing the lessons that we've learned from our previous productions, insights from other productions, from the consultants like Alex and Steve and Suzanne who are working in the field. And then we'll go on.
It sounds like a massive bit of work. Is it reasonable to ask a small production to be able to do that in prep, do you think?
So we don't like part of all of this infrastructure is that we have a sustainability department on it. Like we know from our own experiences that, when we started doing this on our show, started doing work in this space, our commitment was to do it. So we were doing it outside of the scope of our work. And I was at a point in my career where I had capacity to do more than my job, if you like, in some respect. But we're always putting in support. Like the idea of all of this is not to place pressure on the individuals or the production. It's to know that these are our intentions, this is the support, and we have your back. We, you know, the work that we ask of them is we do module work and training prior to starting. We've learned lessons from the previous productions on that, and we'll address that differently on our next production. We build the training, and we're very clear on what we require from them, even from the memo stage, and we'll send them the sustainability handbook as part of that as well. So you could say, yes, it is, like, I guess the framing of that question presents it like it's a problem, but it's an opportunity. It would be a problem if it was an objective of the company that came in after the fact. That's where it's problematic for me, because then the machine's up and running. So so then everyone else is go, okay, well, and now you want this. Whereas if it's always there, it's always there. Like it's part of the model.
And you're going to have to invest that energy at some stage anyway. So if you're investing it up front to get people in the right frame of mind and almost build a sense of intrinsic motivation as well, it's removing those barriers further down the line, presumably. So it's happening somewhere anyway. Steve, could I turn to you? Karl obviously mentioned key crew members and team members. All the crew will contribute to the production's energy performance because they all use energy, you know, be it turning off lights or appliances. But are there some people or some roles that are really key? And in your role as a power consultant, you really want to kind of bring them into your team early and build trust with them?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when you sort of assess it, you've got to really assess the main power users of the show, and every show is different. So it may be a different HOD has a different power requirement on a different job. But I think a good way of looking at it also is splitting it between offset and onset, because they are really different, and the offset being maybe unit based. So then you're talking to supervisor, location manager, unit manager, and to get them on board around clean power I think it's also much easier that those sort of roles are getting used to it. They're monitoring, they're measuring, they're seeing hybrid generators a lot. And then the onset, obviously, so supervising, location manager, unit manager, and then the onset predominantly is the lighting team. So, and I would say it's working, if you can, directly with the DP, the gaffer, the rigging gaffer, the best boy. But I'd just echo what Karl's saying, really. If it's coming at the start and from the top, and everyone is working collaboratively, then it's going to be a lot easier to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And part of your role, I guess, is helping them kind of think and shop differently, or helping production think and shop differently when it comes to power. What sort of extra support are you giving? Like, I imagine the bits around education, and some is like an extra pair of hands, like doing stuff. What does your role look like in terms of the support you provide to those key people?
So you got to tread very carefully, because and you got to be diplomatic, because when you're suggesting power planning, that almost suggests that people haven't power planned before. So so you just have to tread carefully. So I think part of that role is an education piece, but maybe that's too harsh a word. Maybe it's holding hands, it's introducing them to tech. But I'd also say that crew are working all the time. They don't get time to try new tech, or, you know, in between jobs, they may not have the inclination, or, you know, they may not know where to go. So I think you can't just impose new tech on them. You know, partly maybe do some trials and say, actually, if we can run this tech alongside yours, can we trial this? Or can we start, you know, small things like measuring power, and then talking through with them and saying, actually, you know that, Jenny, you're only running it at 10%. Like, can we swap it? Can we improve it? So I think, but it is, we're treading really carefully, and just dealing with, because you've got to remember, they're just focusing on their job, and they want to get the job done, and they want to do the best job they can possibly do. So the less interaction, so that helps.
Thanks, Steve. I hope my internet connection is okay. I'm worried that I'm dropping out a little bit. Suzanne, you've obviously had loads of experience in non-scripted and live broadcast in your previous life. Is it the same sort of key players that Steve was describing that you need to engage with early and make them part of your kind of power team?
Scripted and live events has got some advantages over scripted. They tend to be static, and you tend to have a slightly longer run up.
Yeah.
And because of that, I would say the supply chain in temporary power is much more advanced. So we've managed to learn loads from our live events supply chain. I mean, Eurovision, for example, was the first production, to my knowledge, that actually managed to get live transmission off grid power via mobile UPS and saved over 200,000 litres of fuel over a month with a 1.4 megawatt peak, which was epic. Every time I was watching it and could just see all those flashing lights, I was just thinking that's a lot of lights. But the power supply tends to be booked and managed through one area, whereas on scripted, it's fragmented across lots of different departments. One of the challenges with live events and entertainment is the supply chain can then sometimes subcontract the power out through the OB company, so that comes with complexities too. But there's a real level of excellence across our event sector, so they're really pushing boundaries with what's possible, and what we've been able to do is cherry pick some of their expertise and bring it into scripted. But I think what we have to acknowledge is at the moment our industry, we don't have a framework or an agreed set of metrics that we're all reporting energy efficiency to. So when we come to clean power management, we're having to do it bespoke for every single production and meet them at where they're at. And the clean power hierarchy is fantastic if you've got the ability to design from scratch, like the built infrastructure. But usually we're coming to a production with specific constraints over logistics or creatives or supply chain that we're already locked into. So we've kind of got to work with what we've got, and by focusing on the clean power is almost focusing on the solution, which we don't always have control over. We kind of need to shift mindsets a little bit to focusing on the energy efficiency, which we can impact no matter where we enter the clean power hierarchy at. So that is a fantastic principle that we can work to, but there's also an awful lot that we can do irrespective of where we enter it.
Are you saying then in non-scripted, where you've got something a little bit more stable and repetitive, you've been gathering that data, so you understand the efficiency of the power supply solution you've been working with, and then you're able to improve it as next time because you're working with similar suppliers, similar setups? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was very privileged to have multi-year production. So Chelsea Flower Show, for example. I mean, what we also have to acknowledge is that changing the power setup of a production is ultimately messing with their ultimate resilience. We could take the show off air, which is our commercial model, and there is understandable reluctance. And first year on one production, they didn't even want to engage with the power monitoring tech, but through very careful encouragement, we managed to monitor the production 1 year to get the data to then adopt the same principles of Eurovision for UPSs, but the production with their community was still reluctant. So we took a phased approach, and we didn't do TX power, we just did house power. And similarly with Strictly Come Dancing, we've taken a phased model, but we've been getting really good data for both fuel and kilowatt hours. And the other thing to note is our industry model only requires that we measure litres for the whole production, and that's in line with GHG reporting. But actually, that doesn't help us with energy efficiency. If we're going to manage energy efficiency, we need to look at more isolated generator assets to bring the fuel and the kilowatts together to be able to see the energy efficiency, which will give us levers to drive change and make that incremental progress, either from week to week or day to day through a production, or from series to series.
And that sounds again like being super organized in prep. And then as Steve and Karl was saying, just building that trust and making sure everyone understands the sort of objective. I wanted to move on now to, thanks, Suzanne. I wanted to move on now to the sort of data information gathering. I'm imagining as a power consultant or as a power planner, that there's a phase where you're doing this big investigative piece. Alex, can I ask you just to describe the sort of information, conversations, data you're gathering in those early days in prep to get a feel for the opportunities at the various sites?
Definitely. So, like just to say, I think one essential principle of this early engagement with departments, and obviously Karl has touched on some of that, even ahead of when a sustainability team might be engaging with key members of the crew. The more of that, the better from a sustainability team's point of view in terms of opening the door to these conversations. But certainly, like a key milestone for us early on in prep is that we make a dedicated meeting. We're all probably used to sustainability teams working in slightly different ways, but essentially it comes down to key meetings with key people as early as possible, and a lot of the work comes out of the success of the interaction with those departments, integrating with their workflow and being of use to that department to achieve one of a number of shared objectives. Ultimately, we're involved in one of those, and there's other objectives those departments have that we need to be very respectful of as the primary output of our industry. So we're there to help. And so that mindset going into these meetings is, I think, important. If we were to narrow down like what the early stage processes look like, it's definitely beginning with key department and supplier meetings. And within that you probably be looking at essential departments being lighting, electrical, locations. SFX is one that actually you could forget about, but on a job where there's a lot of special effects going on, the energy demands on set are going to be the biggest from the SFX guys as opposed to from lighting. Interesting. And massive knock-on impacts for doing good stuff with SFX. But I'd be looking, facilities, catering, transport, and I'd be targeting those conversations around what that shared objective is. And our objective is actually not to do a really good power plan. Our objective is to decarbonize the production. The power plan is serving that goal. And so where we can, as much as possible, integrate that power planning process into the work that the team are doing. And now bringing in people with that specific expertise is of a huge benefit to make that seamless. And so what I think my position is in those conversations is to get the best out of the people who are already there and try and really get some of these chunky initiatives off the ground, the things that are going to give us the biggest return on investment. So we'll be exploring in those early conversations, we'll be exploring potential power needs as a primary thing. We'll also be looking at any possible early stage interventions, ideas that they've got from previous jobs that they've been on, things that we can bring to the table, supported by some data that we gathered. And then we're collecting kind of general production information the whole time we're on that job from the very start, which is the schedule, where are we going to be? Are we on location? Are we at studio? When are we doing those things? What are the crew numbers? Are there massive variations in crowd days? When there are crowd days, where are they? What kind of areas are we in? Are there going to be real buildings? Are there going to be marquees? Is it the summer where we're going to need incredible amounts of power to cool that? So all of this stuff is going on, and we're building a picture. We're having those early stage meetings, and then what happens in between those early stage meetings and what would ultimately be a final potential power planning session is we're trying to get ourselves out there on recce's to gather even more of that information, and we're identifying the specific opportunities that are in alignment with that power hierarchy for any initiatives that we can implement.
And I guess you're having those conversations that have to happen early. So, for example, if you were looking at grid connection at a location, then having those conversations with the landlords early, because some things, once that bird has flown, it's like impossible once the shoot started to because of the lead times needed for some of the solutions in terms of grid connections, for example.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's really important for us to recognize actually that the skill set for doing these sorts of jobs may well exist in the team on the ground already. Things may actually be in the planning that we're not there to necessarily make the thing happen. Sometimes the thing's happening and we're just the ones who noticed it or were told about it and we were able to report it back. So really important that we're in touch with those key departments as possible, such that if there is an opportunity to do something that's going to require something budgetary or something from a time point of view or contact with a supplier, we can be the department to make all those extra bits of connection happen so that the thing takes off and that we're not leaving it too late in the day to to make it a success. Examples would include grid extensions, but also clean tech trials, which obviously sometimes can come with quite a lot of logistical things to sort out, and you know, a locations team maybe is already busy on something else. So we're there to be able to be the legwork really for those departments who are keen to do something.
You mentioned kind of power, I think, I don't know if you mentioned the word just power demand or power profiles. So if we'd gone 3 years back in time, we were working completely in the dark, I'd say, in terms of like understanding the kind of typical power profiles for, say, a unit base or catering or lighting. That's changed a bit though, hasn't it? And I think you've brought with you just some examples. If we could see slide B, of load profiles within our industry. And I know Suzanne and Steve will have a load more as well. But Alex, can you just talk through very briefly what these represent and what you're kind of generally looking at to inform kind of decisions, or how it's informed decisions in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're seeing on your screen there is just a sample of some of the different platforms and the kind of the outputs of those platforms that we as sustainability teams and, you know, power managers are interacting with regularly now on production. So one thing to say here is that as an industry, we are now getting access to data of a very high quality. I think the onus is then on us as the sustainability team, but also as interested parties on a production, is what do we do with this information? Because it's all well and good collecting information, but ultimately we should be doing it for a reason. And so what you're collecting could be it should be, I think, driven by what the exam question is, and you may be setting that question. For example, it's quite straightforward when we have a clean tech deployment, let's say, so that on the top right of the slide that's showing there, that's an example from a hydrogen power unit deployment. What we want to show there is there's been a fuel saving as a result of that, or an emission saving activity. We want to record and do our best to measure accurately the emissions benefit of that activity. So that's a clear one where the question was kind of answered for us. The interesting thing is with a lot of this clean tech, you'd be measuring that as a primary thing. But at the same time, with clean technology, we're also getting access to telematics as standard. So there's other opportunities to ask additional questions. And those might include some of the age-old industry questions that we've got at the moment around what are our true power needs for a job of this size? We had this many trailers, and we had catering, and we had EV charge. And in this year, the hydrogen power unit example, we had all of those things. And we also had 300 crowd and a marquee with 60 mirrors. And so what this told us was that our actual peak power demand throughout that entire period was significantly lower than anyone in our crew had predicted, and significantly lower than we had all expected, and we were already, you know, biased from that point of view. So it gave us some really good extra information. And that information, you know, can come from other platforms. You've got examples from an Erica board on the top left there, and then you've got some stuff we're all familiar with, the Victron platform, probably if we're in the sustainability team interacting with that interface. So you can see the kinds of outputs that you can get from there. And I think the goal for us is to make sure we bring any benefit of that knowledge with us onto whatever production we're working on next, because we're starting to build brilliant banks of data. I know Suzanne's got access to loads. Steve's been building brilliant information from his lengthy experience on this stuff. It's important for us to be able to bring that data, turn it into something useful, and use it to guide decisions on the production we're working on, as well as sharing successes of deployments across the industry, I think.
And also fantastic data for suppliers to work with productions to specify a solution for a shoot, but also to support the development of new products, presumably, as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the life cycle of kind of upgrading and replacement of kit with our suppliers is something we should be quite in tune with, because, you know, life cycles can come and go, and if we don't provide the information back in an intelligible form, and we have to also be respectful that these suppliers are primarily there to provide a service, and a lot of what we're asking for from a data point of view, they've responded brilliantly. They've installed telematics, they brought clean tech in, and as you know, they're not often companies of a scale where they have their own in-house sustainability team. So what can we do to help them on their journey is provide them this data that we've got access to and we can interpret. And that can actually start informing some of that future investment. And I've had, recently, and I'm sure everyone, has had various conversations in alignment with this, suppliers are quite excited about the clean tech world and how it's moving. And, some of the conversations I've been having with facilities companies recently, guided by data that they've got, could lead to some really exciting changes around a unit base and how we integrate clean technology such as solar on top of trailers in a meaningful way that feed back into a battery that might be grid connected as well as hybrid with our generator. Some really exciting stuff that hopefully coming soon.
Absolutely. Steve, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to add, because I agree with all the monitoring stuff, and it's great that we're looking at it, but I think this is still so new to so many people. They've never even heard of it or seen it before. So there's a big issue around power literacy, around working out. It's exactly what Alex said. What Jenny do you need? 100 kVA. Okay, where'd you get that from? Actually, have you worked that out? Well, and then as Alex says, you measure it. So then it's a tricky conversation to then say, do you know what? We're only actually drawing 18 kilowatt for the whole week, and you wanted a 100 kVA generator. So that's the bit about, you have to be really delicate. And then but as you say, you take that data to the next job and say, well, actually, this is the profile on 8 trailers and a kitchen and honey wagons for the last 8 weeks on this show. Your show is fairly similar, but it's a bit colder. It's November, so we'll add a bit for the heating. But it's just the data gathering is fairly new, and
But it sounds like what you're saying, Steve, is it is a really powerful tool to show to people and to say, oh, look, this was my assumption, or we chatted about this at the beginning, and look, actually, we were fine, and here's the data. And it's just giving people confidence, because presumably KPIs have always been come in on budget and don't let that power supply fail. And now we've introduced a new one, which is decarbonise that power supply. And it's like, it comes with risk because it's working in a slightly different way, I guess.
It does. I mean, I would echo Suzanne's earlier point about the fuel. I think there's a massive education piece around fuel. People just have a line in the budget called fuel, and it covers everything, from everyone claiming expenses from whatever. And people are just not aware. If you're running a generator at 20%, you're using 4 or 5 times the amount of fuel that if it's running efficiently. But that could be doing 10, 20 litres an hour, 24/7, 7 days a week for no reason. You could hybridize it, put a much smaller set on it. So, yeah.
There's a big piece that we need to engage with around not just the technical side, which is absolutely crucial, but being a non-technical or having become fairly experienced layperson, but in the holistic approach to how we budget for power, how we separate, manage and procure power. What are we asking for? What data are we asking for? From which different suppliers? What's the governance around who's responsible for managing and implementing? And, there's a big education piece for both technical and non-technical.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on that point about budgeting, when we come to in-prep sort of proposing or specifying solutions, so we've gathered that, we've got stakeholders who are engaged. Hopefully we've built trust. People realize they're going to be supported if we're going to be working to try something slightly different. We've gathered data around the various sites, and what they might offer. Maybe there are opportunities for grid connections, maybe not, maybe we're putting one in, maybe we're going to have to bring equipment in. But when it comes to actually saying, okay, specifying the solutions, I don't know who wants to answer this, but is there a very sort of successful model, cost impact model? What's the most effective way to present to a Karl Liegis? Here we go, Karl. We've done the sort of due diligence, very bare bones feasibility. Here's a matrix for you. What would you do? What would you present to Karl?
Oh, maybe shall I answer? Yeah. So how I'd approach this will probably vary depending on what the initiative was that we're talking about and what the context of the production was. What was my relationship, our team's relationship with the department who are leading the initiative? And I think that's crucial. I'd say the most successful initiatives, from my experience, have been the ones that have been led by departments. And I just think that we just need to be of a mindset that as sustainability professionals, we should be really happy when we're not in the limelight for things that have gone well. And I think that is a cost of doing the job well. I would hope that that's the case, that we all probably share that mentality. And so the initiatives that arise naturally through the engagement process that I described earlier, those are the ones we can latch onto, and we do everything to get them across the line that we can, that department needs. So that will vary, and sometimes that's budgetary. And so we have to respect the fact that we are operating within the normal structures of the budgetary constraints of a production. And so one of the things that we can say is that sometimes, and quite often, although it is changing, sustainability initiatives generally have come with a price tag up front. And I think what we are at risk of, potentially, if we're getting past this now, there is a risk that you see that upfront investment for something like a hybrid generator, let's say for your unit base, you quite often you're doubling the weekly hire premium for that setup. Okay, so there's a higher cost, there's an increase in higher premium there. Now what we need to do is start using that data that we were capturing, that we talked about earlier, to be able to generate some insights around what would be a reasonable conservative estimate of a fuel saving that could offset some, if not all, of that increased hire premium. And what that information can do is transform what appears to be a purely sustainability initiative that is based on goodwill and will be constrained only by the budget, to something that can sit harmoniously within a budget that is in alignment with multiple goals. One is delivering power effectively to the base, and the other one is doing it in a lower carbon way. And so what we can start to do there is get these good news stories that we need more of. And actually what we're seeing now with clean tech being more readily available in our industry, I believe, is that a lot of time when I'm running these cost comparisons, there'll be cost and emissions side by side. I'm seeing the cost stuff starting to look a lot more appealing to productions. And I think that's really good news as more of this kit is out there, particularly for, hybridizing unit bases. But I've also noticed that quotes from hydrogen power units have come down significantly from an upfront rental point of view. So it's all really good news. And our job is to basically tell that story in a way that is credible and conservative at the start to help get something across the line, and whatever format's needed, really, we'll put it in.
Carl, how does that sound to you?
As a pitch?
Yes.
I mean, Alex. No, that's. I mean, so there's two different parts to that, isn't there? There's the information that we know now that informs choices in a very considered manner, like Alex says, where it's just like, we have information now that supports this. And then there's the pioneering work, right? And the pioneering work still requires investment, because that's the only way that these things move forward. So the costs that have come down against a lot of the initial things that were pioneering a few years ago are now cost comparable to where we were at, and obviously servicing our objectives and our ambitions to decarbonize the industry as much as possible. So then, but the pioneering work still requires investment. So it would be like the way that I look at it within our scope of what we're doing is that, like, here's the areas where we know that we will continue to keep doing what we're doing, which is with EV vehicles, with diesel free wherever possible on our productions, so that we're HVO as a minimal. And those things are foundations now of what we're doing. And then there'll be the pilot programs and the pioneering work that we're doing to come back to the industry to then inform on what our findings were, because it's vitally important that the information that's being gathered and the data that's being gathered, while not shared in granular, minute detail necessarily, we need to be sharing it so that someone else isn't doing it straight after us, because that's just a waste of time and a waste of energy. Yeah. And the way that the sort of this sector of the industry works is that it is very collaborative. We are communicating all the time around things. You've got three sort of competitors on a call here, but we talk as if we're part of exactly the same thing, because we're all eager to find the next thing that is going to help decarbonize the industry. That's the overall goal. So when you're looking at these things, it's the data becomes so much bigger. The possibility for data is so much bigger because so many people are collaborating within this part of the industry, and so we get there quicker. So then it's like, okay, we've got this information from all of these places. Okay, what's next? And and just to like, I think this is really important to recognize as well, is to sort of shout out the new Albert Accelerate report, which does, in my mind, exactly that. It's like all of this information that all of these guys have been doing and all of the work that the productions have been doing, it for the first time, it's self-acknowledging in that it does provide a blueprint that is accessible to everyone at every level about the things that we can really, really do. So you can listen to all of us on this call, and you might get lost within many of the things that people are saying, but I can tell you now that if you go and read that Accelerate report, it will give you everything that you need to know as a starting point. So I highly advocate for the work that everyone's done on that report, because it's come from the industry, and the report's been fed back. The industry's fed into this report, and that's not. I'm not sponsored by. I mean, I've got an April hat on for no, but I'm not sponsored by Albert. You know, we've all got we all have our own ways of feeling like how we can move this forward. But the truth is that really does demystify and provide tangible actions for us as an industry to do, and that has come from the data gathering and sharing that this sector of the industry has done.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's when everything feels fragmented bits of data, but you start to see these patterns emerging, I guess, that can become principles and guidelines for us to use as an industry. And I think, yeah, I think we're really, yeah, about to go into that phase, which is exciting. Suzanne, I'd like to come.
I was going to say, Karl, I just got another point on costs, just because I know we mentioned
it. Yeah, no, go for it.
Just back to what Alex is saying around it, it will cost you. Well, I don't know if it is double, but it could be double to hybridize your unit-based generator. But you're going to save 50% in fuel. So if you do your calculation, at least 50% in fuel. So as Alex says, they're really offsetting. So I think it's quite important just to give people those sort of numbers. If you use a stage 3 generator, a stage 5 generator against a stage 3 generator, you're going to use 25% less fuel, but it's probably going to be 25% more expensive to go stage 5. But then you're going to have a reduction in emissions, which you may be paying to offset at the end of it. So actually, the costs all come into it.
I think those calculations in prep, even if they're just, they're relatively high level, as you say, Steve, they're just so important to make sure we've got the fuel savings captured in there, and we're comparing it against the business as usual case. I think, and I've certainly seen some solutions be cost neutral, and other solutions actually will save you money if you've done the investigation up front. I'm thinking specifically around connecting to the grid. So having that laid out for discussion early doors seems to sort of be the right thing to do.
For that, I think where I've seen the most success is when there is that really holistic supported approach from funder through to production company, supplier and freelancer, because ultimately there is risk of uncertainty that we don't know how much it's going to cost until you get to the end. So when that responsibility is shouldered on the production company alone, with these short-term cycles, and where we can approach it with a supported way, and it does open the conversation to thinking creatively about different finance models, whether it's insetting or shared savings models, because often the savings that can be felt aren't either until the end or felt or received by those that need to invest in training or new tech. But when there has been support through initiatives up front to shoulder some of that responsibility, either with expertise around resilience or finance, that's when we see the real success, and can get, as you say, cost benefits, cost neutrals. But there are some circumstances, it's all depending on the size and scope and scale of the production, where it will cost. But we can be quite strategic in picking off where we're going to focus our efforts to get the biggest savings.
And can I just jump in as well? I'm just going to add to that. There's this, I think one of the things that, Karl, you do so brilliantly, you describe brilliantly on here, is encouraging, just in a safe way, questioning our preconceptions about business as usual, because when you actually just scratch under the surface about our existing default solutions for power, for example, you can find that they're a bloody expensive way of generating energy. So like chucking a litre of diesel or HVO into your Jenny, and that generator being badly sized, the data that we're now getting access to is telling us a story that we're paying about between £1.50 and as low as 50p if you've got a very well functioning generator. But effectively, we're getting a kilowatt hour out for a litre in an oversized Jenny, which is kind of historically our traditional default in our industry. £1.50 a kilowatt hour is a lot of money. Plus the hiring of the kit in the first place. You know, we're not competing with a really cost-effective model. We're competing with a model that has just existed for a long time. And so when we are getting this data, what we're able to, it's not that difficult to tell the good stories when you have enough credible data, because the benchmark, you know, for generating power in an oversized generator is actually quite low from a cost point of view, let alone an emissions point of view.
No, absolutely. I wanted to move now on to monitoring performance and capturing data, which Suzanne is your specialist subject. So I'm going to pick on you first. But in terms of in prep, the practical things that you need to put in place to be able to get that brilliant data we saw in the slides that Alex showed us, you know, what sort of stuff are you doing in prep to make sure you're going to get that? And also what you're going to use it for actively during production, during the shoot.
Getting buy-in for a start from the team that it's important and why it's important, and helping them understand their role to play in a bigger picture. But then it's understanding what's the supply chain, what telematics do they have? Some generators will have telematics and inline monitoring. Sometimes you have to retrofit telematics. So then figuring out, you know, getting the right people together, what's their size and spec if you're retrofitting to make sure that it's bespoke. I mean, there's also different types of monitoring. Are you monitoring the generator in totality, or are you really want to try and drill down a bit where you can get socket by socket or hut by hut, you know, the difference between makeup and costume, or catering. I mean, when we start monitoring catering, that shows us all sorts of anomalies with the demands and opportunities there, particularly with ovens transitioning to electric ovens that are powered by diesel generators. But, you know, as I mentioned before on one event, the team were really reluctant to put the kit because they were unfamiliar with it. So, but it is becoming more and more familiar. And then it's about weeding through, you know, the peak loads, the average loads compared to the size of the generator. I mean, I think I've got data from about 30 odd productions where most of them, you know, they're averaging at about 10%, you know, some a little bit more, some a bit less, peak loads, you know, going up a bit further. But it really does show us, you know, when you look at the size of your generator against your average and peak loads, really the scale of the opportunity. But the other thing is it's understanding, you know, the kilowatt hours per litre, and that we can monitor hourly, daily across series. We can compare that between productions, whether it's, you know, EastEnders or Eurovision or Doctor Who or whatever it might be, and it gives us a common metric where we can measure performance.
So the telemetry is very much focusing on the loads, the kilowatt hours, presumably. But the fuel, if you want to monitor fuel to get this amazing data on fuel savings that Alex needs, that he can then impress Karl with, that, you know, we can then as a group say, yes, you know, confidently, let's invest in this because it's going to save us all this fuel. How difficult is that practically to get? What are you doing in prep to set that up?
That is the cultural challenge, because as an industry, we're not used to measuring fuel per generator. We are getting better at measuring it per production, but it still ultimately needs to be itemised on your invoices. But getting it, you know, when you've got freelancers topping it up from Bowser's, it is a challenge to get that information. So then, you know, what a lot of, you know, technical specialist suppliers are able to do is estimate based on the kilowatt hours, how much fuel it's using. But again, there's no common way of establishing how to do that unless you're working, you know, because we've got different levels of suppliers, like, you know, your Agrecos, your Power Logistics, that are real specialists in power. And then our unit-based community, facility vehicles, I mean, some of them are doing fantastic things, hats off to them, but that's not their widget. It's not, you know, power comes as part of that. So, you know, there's different levels of maturity in understanding, you know, being able to make some of these calculations.
Yeah, no, challenging indeed.
Can I add to
yes,
that, Carly?
Absolutely.
Because I think it's back to the onset and offset. Because I think offset facilities vehicles, as Suzanne says, they're doing some brilliant stuff. You know, there's Erica boards for splitting power by costume and all the rest of it. Lighting is a big issue in terms of power and power specking, because, you know, and generally, and this is down to timing as well. You know, the lighting provider normally has a confirmed list about 1 week before principal photography, or maybe 3 days before principal photography, and then, you know, the line producer starts getting 3 quotes in. You don't even know if you've got the job. So, and then the generator carries equipment. So the generator is a 200 kilowatt generator that's run for 18 weeks. But for 4 days out of 5, it's running at 5 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt, but it is carrying kit. So I think actually fundamental change to lighting is if the budget line was split between lighting and power, you could move a long way. I'm not saying you need to split the provider, but if the right generator could come in on the right day, you know, for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we can run on batteries, but for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we've got a load of 18Ks doing a cathedral, so we're going to have a big generator back in. So if that was split, that would make a massive difference.
I'd add to that as well. I agree, it's difficult. We've got much less data on lighting generators, got lots of retrofitted data from unit bases and from events, but lighting is a bit of a blind spot. We've got some. I mean, I've got even from Silent Witness, the gaffer, God love him, was literally logging it manually, which enabled Sunbelt to invest a huge amount of money in a hybrid lighting Jenny carrier, and they've now got a few of them. One of the things that we've managed to do with other lighting companies is acknowledge that the supply chain can't just miraculously invest 250, 500,000 pounds overnight when they're getting contracted for a couple of weeks at a time. So it's looking at what can we do within the parameters of our very unique circus-like industry, and actually we can stick with that lighting Jenny carrier, but supplement with some batteries when half the time Video Village or the T-Urn is running off just a few kilowatts. And if we can get like a 10 kilowatt battery that can come along with the package, so it's that, well, we're paying extra, so people don't want to do it, but you can save, 25%, 50% fuel, because you're running the battery to power a lot of your, when you've just got a few little domestic light settings, and when you've got the 18 kilowatt, you need to get those big lights out. You've still got your big Jenny there, but it is just thinking a little bit differently, and it does come back to that paying up front to get the savings later. And we need some, a different culture thinking around that approach to budgeting clean power.
And that's on the shoot itself, Suzanne, coming up with those creative solutions. And obviously you need to understand how to be able to attack that. But Karl, is there stuff you can do behind the scenes with suppliers, so longer term, to deal with those structural issues that Steve was kind of talking about, the way people package things up or price things? Would you have a view on that, Karl?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the conversations being early doors, right? That's fundamental to all of it. So the way that I see our relationships with suppliers is that we're investors. Like we're building a partnership, but ultimately with the finances that we're bringing to the company, there is an opportunity that comes with that investment. And so we look at what possibilities could be created from that relationship and partnership that we are talking about having, and then look at the developments that organization could have that could service things better, could create clean power, could become, we talk about it like across the board in terms of accessibility. We talk about it in terms of training. We talk about it in terms of the all of that scope of production support. But within sustainability, there's really tangible ones where a company could go, well, this is something that we really wanted to do, but we haven't been able to do yet, and it's the same looking at sort of, when you look at the Albert's directory, suppliers directory, you can sort of, you feel that there is organizations that would be like, if we could just get this money, we could just do this. And it's like, well, we'll back you, we'll give you the project, but then the commitment has to be that you do X by that point, or during the project you move into this realm and you start doing these things. So it's like, so we're not saying with all of the money that we're giving you, you need to completely transform your company, because as Steve rightly says, it could be for 2 weeks. It's like that's not, you may never use it again, but it's something, if they're looking at doing it anyway and it's brought up in the initial conversations that we're having with them, it's like, this is something that we could get on board with, because you're providing us with a service and we're also developing your company in a way that creates greater sustainability practices within it.
I think your inbox is going to be full with emails from suppliers wishing to collaborate on that stuff, Karl. I think that sounds amazing. That's exactly what suppliers want to hear.
Yeah, and that, and yourself, and it's not like, and we run pilots as well. That's the other thing. I'm now like trying to create my inbox to be more full, but I don't mean that in any way. This isn't a sales pitch, but it's like, if you're bringing something that is genuinely going to that's not going to be that feels tangibly like it's going to have an impact, not just on our show but on the industry wider, then absolutely. And I would say that I would hope that there were lots of other organizations, companies that would feel the same way. Like it has to, partnerships that exist for a reason, and like we've got the project, and so therefore if they want to develop something, that's, there was the golden period that we had in TV. It's like there was loads and loads of productions happening all the time, and you look back on that and go like, God, imagine if that whole time we were able to gather so much information and data. But now it's like, every single time you get a commission, you should look at it as being, there's a possibility to do something here to transform the industry. Like, it's really that simple. These aren't, we're not churning out things. These are possibilities. They are opportunities to create things from this commission. Yeah.
No, I love that. One last question about HVO before we move to the audience's questions. Suzanne, I'm going to give you a minute. So obviously, the power management hierarchy, ultimately, we want to not be using liquid fuel in the future. That's the ultimate goal. But at the minute, it's very unlikely we're going to get away with not using liquid fuel on a production. So what should you be doing in prep? We will have a separate session, by the way, purely on HVO. So that's why I'm giving you a minute to answer this. But what should you be doing in prep just to get your ducks in a row in terms of responsible HVO sourcing?
So as it's a transitional fuel, as you say, but it can bring about very quick emission reduction straight away. But it's really about checking the certification of it. If it is too cheap, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, and it's probably not of good source. So really, it's the Zemo partnership actually certify different fuels. So it's just checking, asking your supplier for certification to check that it's of good quality HVO. And I would also say, setting out your parameters of reporting, making sure that you're getting the litres and the fuel type while you're purchasing. I mean, you can try, if you're a bigger company, you can negotiate different deals for repeat projects, which is what we did when I was at Studios, and we managed to get 90% elimination of diesel off all of our UK productions. Certification, Zemo partnership.
Amazing, thank you. So we're going to move to the audience Q&A. Audience, if you haven't put a question into the Q&A box, please do so. Before we do move to that, I have a little announcement, and that is, apparently there is a short survey link in the chat. I'd be grateful if people would complete it, but it will also be sent to your email too. So let me have a little look at the Q&A. Okay, So we've got a question here. What and how can we learn from other industries? For example, construction, events, live music. Who would like to take that? Any volunteers? Suzanne, I can see you. Oh, go on, Steve.
I can
Amazing.
take a bit. Construction, we can learn quite a lot because they've moved a lot into battery energy storage systems and hybridization. Now, it's much easier for them because a construction site stays there for 6 months, 12 months, and they're generally skid sets. But pretty much a lot of construction sites are hybridized. Music, Suzanne, do you want to take music or you?
I would say zoning, zoning different areas, and we don't have to let perfection put us off with achieving in different areas. So, whether you've got the security hut or, one different stage, you've got grid access somewhere. I mean, on D-Day, for example, we were convinced that we weren't going to be able to have clean power with over 100 veterans walking along the beach, but actually the supplier managed to find a bit of temporary grid supply and excelled in their solutions.
Lovely, thank you. Next question. We have limited budget and resources. What should we focus on? And I think I'm imagining they're asking this within the context of limited resources in terms of, this whole thing that we've talked about, the planning, the stakeholder engagement, the cost models, whatever. Karl, can I give that one to you?
Yes.
Where would you put your money?
So I would
best impact.
I would have a sustainability consultant come in early doors in the production to talk about the production, to understand it, and they will find areas of opportunity, and it's going to be power. Like power and fuel are going to be the two areas that they'll look at, and they will be able to find ways in which you can integrate that early on. And then also they'll look at models that you can build into your production. So like I talked about, sustainability council, power plan groups. So you basically integrate it into the production, so it's in the culture. That is the cheapest way for you to really bring about an engagement with sustainability. And the consultant, whether they be hired for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever you can afford, will give you a steer on the target areas within the production that you're doing to be able to find that.
No, that's good advice.
I can add to that, Karl, as well.
Please.
Just because I would really focus on grid first.
On what? Sorry, Steve.
On grid connection first, local power.
Yeah.
So wherever you're filming, try and avoid generators, seek out the grid power. It's so much cheaper. It's going to save you so much money in fuel and hire if you don't need it. And also make sure you've got a qualified electrician that could use the grid power, that could wire into the fuse box. Use companies out there that could, like we had Neil on at Folex last time, that could save you a lot of money by just seeking grid power. I mean,
are we seeing a lot more of industries, temporary, I guess they're temporary power electrical contractors moving into our industry? Obviously there's Neil from Folex, as you mentioned. Well, it's actually, can I ask that question?
I think we have to, well, we are seeing it, but we also have to see it with the responsibilities around electricity. BS 7909 is completely overlooked on most productions, temporary power. So I think at some point, there could be a role of a production electrician that could do that, or you appoint someone like Folex to seek that grid power on tech wreckies. It's not the gaffer's responsibility to seek grid power for catering. And whereas a lot of people think it is, that, the gaffer's the electrician, but actually the gaffer's just doing the lighting. So I would say we should see more of it.
Yeah, he's got a very important day job. He can't be running around unit based sorting stuff out, I guess. Yeah. Well, he or she, sorry. I've got one here. Do you feel that there is a benefit to refraining from providing too much info and data early on to big stakeholders and HODs and focusing purely on cost effectiveness? Oh, interesting. So not talking about carbon or fuel. Well, just talking about cost, pound signs. Alex, you've come into the frame here. Are you ready to answer this?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, 100%. So I
Yeah.
mean, our industry is full of expert communicators, right? And so, like, as sustainability teams, I also feel like one of the key skills that we need to have is to be able to read the room. Like, who are we speaking to? Who are we delivering information to? What's important to them? How much time have they got to receive this information? And in what format is it going to be most readily digested? And what do we actually want as a result of this conversation? So we should be thinking like that all the time. And, you know, everyone's used to seeing different versions of sustainability comms that go out on production. A lot of the comms that we do is happening, obviously, to individual departments, individual people within crews and heads of department in particular. And I would say that's a really good question. It's about who you're speaking to as to which bit you'd be emphasizing. But I can say across the board, cost is always a motivator for someone with a budget, no matter their other intentions. And obviously the dream scenario is where your department engagement process has got you to a point where you've built enough knowledge and a working relationship with a key person in the crew such that you have unearthed some, like, it's rare to find someone who you work closely with for enough time who's not got some connection to the environmental objectives at the production company level and within your team as a sustainability group. You know, it might be coming from, they might be emphasizing different aspects of the environment, but a lot of people care about biodiversity, but that very easy to link back to carbon. Like, I myself sometimes find carbon numbers inherently uninspiring. I love it at the end and I love measuring the benefit of what we've done, but I really think in terms of engagement, it's about leaning on the bits that you know are important. Cost is always going to be important. And also this idea that not necessarily a metric, but that some people like the idea that they are driving progress and at the forefront of something. And so leaning into that is, I have found to be a really successful thing to be doing. And then that goes back to that point about we're trying to make stars of our crew. And if someone is prepared to put their head above the parapet and take something on that's not been done before and really push it, and we're following behind, making sure we measure it in the right way and that things are happening in the right way, that's a massive success. And I've seen a number of senior members of crew getting really motivated by that.
I think that really resonates with me. I just think as human beings, we all want to be part of something, don't we? So yeah, no, that's really powerful.
Just to add to that as well,
yeah.
I mean, I totally agree. It's about enrollment and whatever form that comes in. It's in many different guises. So you can talk about power with the electrical department. You can talk about creativity and the environmental side of things and construction with the art department. And one person who I don't feel like they'll mind me sharing this story, but we were in a power plant meeting, and we'd been talking about all of the aspirations and Karl, I think you were in that meeting as well, and we were talking about all of the aspirations for the show. And then the person really, like, I use the word inspiringly but bravely at the time, basically said, I've learned how to do my job incredibly well, and everything that you're talking about, like using these methods, using the methods that I have, which are you are now saying you don't want to use, or you want to try and mitigate. How, like, I'm petrified that I'm now back to square one with doing my job. So I can't get the goals. I can't, you know, like I'm back to the start again in what I'm doing. And that share that they made was like the foundation that we ended up like building on. And there was like resistance, and there were things that came to head, and our, you know, sustainability team on that did brilliantly to like sort of constantly be reevaluating how we do things. But that individual, the progress that they made from in terms of our collective objectives on the show, because of the position that they were in, like it was transformational. And hopefully the learnings that they took and the experience that they had on the show, with the support that was provided and the sort of the safe space for them to do that, means that they can go on to other productions and be advocating for it to happen, and to be active in bringing about that transformation within their own department, as opposed to just going back to, okay, well, now I can just go back to doing my job the way that I was doing it, with the resources that I require to make me look good and for me to not worry.
it's sort of proper growth mindset stuff, isn't it? And I guess when you're a freelancer, not working for a set organization, sometimes you kind of miss out on those environments where you can, thrive in that way. I don't think we've got any other Q&A questions from the audience. So I'm just going to ask one final question. And if you could keep it to a kind of 20, 30-second answer, and it's quite simply, what are you most excited about? I feel like the excitement has built as this session has gone on today, and I feel like you're all quite excited. But yeah, just briefly, Karl, we'll start with you. What are you most excited about?
Come on, I went first with the naming.
Oh, okay. Alex, you're a quick thinker.
Okay. I'll go for it. Yeah. So I think it'd be really tempting to pick a really flashy, exciting, clean tech. But actually, what I'm most excited about is some ideas that have recently come from facilities companies, actually, in conversations I've had with them around revolutionizing the whole economic model around delivering power to unit base. And so I'm excited about what has been coined in other industries as energy as a service. But is there a world? I think we're not far away from a world where a facilities company is backing themselves to deliver a powered unit base for a fee, which would then completely change the incentive structure for energy conservation at a unit base, because their objective then is to deliver that powered unit base in the most efficient way possible. So the trailers are going to be fully insulated. Of course they are, because they're burning money sending it out the window. But also we're going to be moving away from liquid fuels as such an expensive way of providing kilowatt hours to that base. We're going to be moving towards battery grid power being moved around with a base in the form of a battery and swapped over at moves. I'm really excited about that.
Wow. Yeah, you heard it here first. Thanks, Alex. By the way, no one was briefed that this question was coming. So, Steve, over to you. Sorry,
Yeah.
panelists.
Yeah,
Steve,
we didn't know it was coming. Yeah,
keep you on your toes.
I would say that it's a bit piecemeal, but when you talk to someone about the power literature, and then you can demonstrate the real what they are drawing, because they've not really known up until this point, and they don't have an understanding of the power. So when you see that and you see the change, they start to get it. And then when you get a few of those people getting it, then it all moves together. And that's really exciting as we see more of that. So yeah, it's a piecemeal one, but hopefully it, change.
I love that kind of learning through doing and discovering yourself. There's nothing better. Suzanne.
Excited about is beginning to have some conversations with different stakeholders about a shared approach, a shared framework, shared metrics, bringing a bit more structure to this fragmented challenge that we have, and also bringing temporary power safety along the same journey. So I think there's some really exciting opportunities ahead to have a bit more of a united approach where we can all be working to the same yardstick. And I'm quite excited about that, because I think once we all start talking the same language and measuring in the same way and bringing visibility to what we're measuring, then that's where we can really see progress happen, because it's comparable, it's visible. And yeah, I'm starting to see some conversations around that. So that's really exciting for me.
And if there's a woman who's going to get that done, it's you for sure. Karl.
I'm going to have ambitions off the back of Suzanne's, which is that we were in a place where we where finally productions had money in a budget that was allocated for carbon offsetting, and that is no longer a requirement. However, what I would like to see is that comes back in, and that is in setting, and that comes a general fund that then is managed somehow, much like the high-end TV fund, where every production that is running can put money into it, and then that money is used to further the industry within sustainability. That is what I'm excited about, because I'm putting it there. It doesn't exist yet, but that's why I'm putting it off the back of those collaborations and that cross communication, everyone getting on the same page with things, that from that we end up in a place where there is this to then enhanced grid power to set up websites for construction companies and for art departments to be able to communicate with each other and to move things around between the industry. There you go.
Amazing. Very ambitious note to end on.
Can I answer one question that's come in about a hybrid generator? But I'll do it very quickly, just because it says, as a specialist power provider invested in a hybrid generator vehicles, and because I had
yes, of
direct
course you can go for it.
of that, because I think because the tech was so new at the time, maybe we failed to really do what the question says, is which how do we make it more encouraging for people to use it. But I would say that you've really, back to Alex's point about the cost, you've got to get some data around that hybridized generator and how much fuel it is going to save at different loads. And I think if you started to market it that way, because people just look at it and go, well, it's more expensive than the other one, but you need to counteract that with actually, yeah, but it's going to save this and it's going to save this. So maybe that's a way.
Absolutely. So really sort of stating that commercial case.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think we've reached the end of today's session. Thank you to the audience for all your fantastic, thoughtful questions and for sticking with us. I know it's been quite technical in places. Special thank you to our panelists, of course, Karl, Suzanne, Alex and Steve for sharing their valuable insights. One key takeaway for me, while we don't yet have all the answers, I'm just really proud to be part of this film TV community, because I think we're an incredibly collaborative community, and I think that's been really clear from the conversations we've had today. Hope you'll join us for the next session, which is on December the 2nd. It will focus on HVO, but for now, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.